The Night of Milky Way Train. Kenji Miyazawa. 1. The afternoon class. Ben, you said it was a river or milk, but do you know what this long white thing really is? There was a large black map of stars hanging on the blackboard. The teacher pointed to the white part of the map and asked everyone. Campanella raised his hand. Then 4 or 5 boys raised their hands, too. Giovanni also tried to raise his hand, but he stopped halfway through. He once read in a magazine that all the white things were stars. But lately, Giovanni felt sleepy almost every day, and he had no time for reading. In fact, he didn't have any books to read. So he felt like he didn't understand anything. But the teacher noticed him. Giovanni. You know, don't you? Giovanni stood up at once. But when he stood up, he couldn't answer it clearly. Zanelli looked back from the front seat. And when he saw Giovanni, he grinned. Giovanni's face turned red. The teacher said again. If you look at the Milky River with a big telescope, what will you see? Giovanni thought it was stars. But he still couldn't answer it. The teacher seemed to be at a loss for a while. But this time he looked to Campanella. What do you think, Campanella? Campanella had raised his hand so well, but he couldn't answer either. The teacher was surprised. He was watching Campanella for a while. However, the teacher pointed to the star map, saying, well, okay. If you look at this white Milky River with a big good telescope, you can see many little stars. Won't you, Giovanni? Giovanni turned red and nodded. Giovanni's eyes were full of tears. He thought, yes, I knew that. Of course Campanella knew it as well. It was in the magazine. Campanella and I read it together at his house. His father is a doctor. After reading the magazine, Campanella brought a big book from his father's room and opened the page about the Milky Way. We saw beautiful pictures with white dots all over the black pages for a long time. Campanella hasn't forgotten that at all. So why didn't he answer? Maybe it's because he felt sorry for me. These days, I have been working hard every morning and late afternoon. Even when I go to school, I don't play with the others. And I don't talk with Campanella. He felt sorry for me, so he didn't answer. I feel sorry, both of us. The teacher said again. So, if you think this really is a river, each little star is a grain of sand in that river, and if you think it is a big stream of milk, it's more like the Milky River. Each star is a ball of fat floating in the milk, and what is the water of the river? The answer is a kind empty space where light moves. The sun and the earth are also floating in it. That means we are living in the water of the Milky Way. And if we looked around from inside that water, the stars would seem to be gathered closer together at the bottom. That's why it looks white and not very clear. Now look at this model. The teacher pointed to a big double lens. There were many shiny grains of sand in it. The shape of the Milky Way is just like this. These growing grains are all shining stars, like our sun. Our sun is almost at the center here. The Earth is very close to it. Now, imagine you are standing in the middle of this at night. Look around the inside of the lens. This part of the lens is thinner, so you can see only a few shining stars. But these parts of the lens are thick, so you can see a lot of shining stars. The ones in the distance look white and they're not clear. That is what people think about the Milky Way today. Well, time's up. Next lesson, I'll explain how big this lens is and about the various stars inside it. As you know, today is the Star Festival. So please go outside tonight and look at the sky. The class is over. Put your books and notebooks away. And the classroom was filled with the sounds of noise. The desks were opened and closed. Books were put in piles. Then everyone stood up. They bowed to the teacher and left the classroom. Second, printing company. Giovanni went outside. 7 or 8 boys in the same class gathered at the cherry tree in the schoolyard without going home. Campanella was in the middle of it. They were talking about going to get some cucumbers. They needed some cucumbers to make blue lights. They were going to bring the lights to the Star Festival and would float them on the river tonight. Giovanni left school in a hurry, swinging his arms high. In the houses of the town, the balls of leaves were hung and lights were put on the pine branches. All the people were preparing for the Star Festival tonight. Without returning home, Giovanni turned 3 corners and entered a big printing company. There was a man in a white shirt at the entrance. Giovanni bowed, took off his shoes, and went in. He opened a big door. It was still daytime, but the lights were on inside the room, and many press machines were working loudly. There were a lot of workers. They were wearing shades over their eyes or had cloths tied around their heads. They were all reading and counting something just as though they were singing. Giovanni went up the man sitting at the 3rd high table from the entrance. He bowed. The man searched for a shelf for a while and then, "Can you pick out this many?" he said, giving Giovanni a piece of paper. Giovanni took out a small box from the foot of the table. He went over to a corner where the lights were very bright and crouched down. And he started picking out pieces of printing type with a small pair of tweezers. Each one was the size of a grain of rice. A man with a blue apron walked past behind Giovanni. "Hi, Mr. Magnifying Glass, good morning," he said. 4 or 5 men nearby laughed. They didn't turn to look at him. Giovanni carefully picked out the pieces of type. He rubbed his eyes many times. Sometime after the clock struck 6, Giovanni had filled the box with the type. He checked it again, looking at the pieces of paper in his hand. Then he took the box back to the man at the high table. The man silently received it and nodded. Giovanni bowed. He opened the door and went to the desk at the entrance. The man wearing the white shirt silently gave a small silver coin to Giovanni. Giovanni looked a little better. He bowed deeply and jumped out with a bag under the table. He whistled cheerfully and dropped by the bakery. He bought some bread and a bag of sugar cubes. Then he started running as fast as his legs would carry him. 3. Home. Giovanni came back home cheerfully. He lived in a small house in the back town. There were 3 entrances lined up there, and there was an empty box on the left door. Purple cabbage and asparagus were planted in the box. The sunshades were down on the 2 small windows. Mom, I'm back now. How are you feeling? Giovanni asked while taking off his shoes. Oh, Giovanni, you had hard work, so you must be tired. It was cool today. I've been feeling better. Giovanni entered the front door. Giovanni's mother was resting in the room next to the entrance. There was a white cloth over her body. Giovanni opened the window. Mom, I bought sugar cubes today. I thought you could have some in your milk. Oh, you should eat something first. I don't feel like having anything yet. Mom, when did sister go home? Around 3 o'clock. She did a lot of housework. Hasn't your milk come yet? I don't think so. I'll go and get it then. Oh, I can wait. Have your dinner first. Your sister made something using tomatoes and left it there. Okay, I'll have it now. Giovanni took a plate of tomatoes from the window. He ate it with some bread for a while. Hey, Mom. I'm sure Dad will be back soon. Oh, I think so, too. But why do you think so? Because this morning's newspaper said that the fishing in the north was very good this year. Oh, but your father may not be on a fishing boat. I'm sure he is. I don't believe he did anything bad and went to prison. The other day, he brought a lot of things to school, like big crab shells and reindeer horns. They are still in the science room. The teachers always take them to the classroom in the 6th grade. Your father said he would bring you a sea otter jacket next time. Everyone says it suits me. They say it as if they're making fun of me. Do they say bad things to you? Yes, but not Campanella. He never says anything like that. When the other boys say bad things, Campanella looks sorry for me. His father and your father had been close friends since they were small like you. Oh, that's why Dad took me to Campanella's house. I'm glad I was back then. On my way home from school, I often dropped by Campanella's house. He had a toy train which ran on alcohol. There were 7 pieces of rail, and if you put them together it made a circle. It also had telegraph poles and signals. The signal lights turned green only when the train passed. One day, we ran out of the alcohol. When we used oil instead, the train turned completely black. Did it really? I still go to deliver the newspaper every morning, but the house is always quiet. Because it's early morning. They have a dog called Zal. His tail is like a brush. When I go there, he always follows me as far as the corner of the town. Sometimes even further. Tonight, they're all going to float cucumber lanterns on the river. I'm sure the dog will follow them. Oh, yes. It's the Star Festival tonight. Yeah. I'll go and see it while taking milk. All right. But, don't go into the river. No. I'll only see it from the bank. I'll be back in an hour. You can spend longer if you like. I won't worry if you're with Campanella. Oh, I'm sure we're together. Mom, shall I close the window for you? Oh, please. It's getting cooler. Giovanni stood up and closed the window. He put away his plates and the bag of bread. Then he put on his shoes in a lively way. I'll be back in an hour and a half, he said. He went out through the dark doorway. The night of the Centaur Festival. Giovanni was whistling sadly. He went down the hill of the town. There were dark trees on both sides. Under the hill, one big street lamp stood shining brightly. Giovanni went down to the lamp. Giovanni's shadow had been behind him, long and dark like a monster. But as he walked towards the lamp, the shadow got darker and clearer. Then it lifted its feet and waved its hands, and moved round to his side. I'm a great locomotive, thought Giovanni. This is a hill, so I speed up. Now, I'm passing the street lamp. Well, now my shadow is like a compass. It's gone all the way round, and came to the front. Giovanni passed under the street lamp. Suddenly Zanelli came out from the dark street behind the lamp. He was wearing a new shirt with a sharp-pointed collar. He passed Giovanni. Zanelli, are you going to see the lanterns on the river? Before Giovanni said so, Giovanni, your dad is bringing you a sea otter jacket. Zanelli shouted back. Giovanni's heart suddenly felt cold. The air around him seemed to be screaming. What did you say, Zanelli? Giovanni shouted back loudly. But Zanelli had already gone inside the house across the road. Why does Zanelli say things like that to me, thought Giovanni. I haven't done anything wrong to him. He looks like a mouse when he runs. The reason he says things like that is that he is stupid. Giovanni walked through the town, thinking about various things. The town was beautifully decorated with various lights and branches. A bright light was on in the window of the clock shop. Giovanni stopped to look. There was an owl with red stone eyes that turned round every second. There was also a thick glass disc. Its color was like the sea. Various jewels were placed on it. As the disc slowly turned, they looked just like stars. The figure of a centaur slowly appeared from the back. In the middle of the disc was a round black map of stars decorated with green asparagus leaves. Giovanni stared at it, forgetting everything. It was much smaller than the one he saw at school today. But with this one you could fix the day and time. Then the sky would appear just as it really was. So today the Milky Way was right at the center. It was like a white belt going from top to bottom. At the bottom there was steam rising. Behind the disk there was a small three-legged telescope. It was shining yellow. And hanging on the wall at the back of the shop there was a big map of the stars. They were all in the shape of things like mysterious beasts, snakes, fish, and water pots. Giovanni stood there for a while, There were really such a scorpion and warriors in the sky. Oh, I wanted to walk through them forever, he thought. Suddenly, he remembered his mother's milk and walked away from the shop. His jacket was too tight across his shoulders, but he kept his head high. He went through the town swinging his arms high. The air was clear. It flowed through the streets and between shops like water. All the street lamps were wrapped with dark green branches. The 6 platanus trees in front of the electric company were covered in little lights. It looked like the city of mermaids. The children were all wearing brand new clothes. They were whistling the Star Traveler's song as they ran around, and they were letting off blue fireworks. They shouted, playing happily, "Centaurus, send the dude down on us." Giovanni rushed to the milk shop. His head was hanging down again. His mind was on very different things from all the things going on around him. Giovanni came to the place where many tall trees reached high up into the starry sky. He entered a dark gate of the milk shop. He stood in front of a dark kitchen. There was a smell of cows. He took off his cap and said, "Good evening." But there didn't seem to be anyone in the house. "Good evening." "Excuse me." Giovanni stood straight and shouted again. Then, after a while, an old woman appeared. She was walking very slowly and looked ill. "What do you want?" she asked in a low voice. "Well, the milk didn't come to our house today, so I've come to get it," Giovanni replied brightly. "I don't know because there's nobody here now," said the woman as she looked down at Giovanni. "Please come back tomorrow." She rubbed under her red eyes. "But my mother is sick," replied Giovanni. "We'll be in trouble if we don't get the milk tonight." "Then please come back later," said the woman as she turned to go. "All right. Thank you," said Giovanni. He bowed and came out of the kitchen. He went back towards the crossroads in town. Then he saw some black shadows and white shirts in front of a shop on the road to the bridge. 6 or 7 boys were walking along whistling and laughing. Each one was holding a blue light lantern. Giovanni knew those laughs and whistles very well. They were his classmates. Giovanni tried to return, but he then changed his mind. He walked towards them in an energetic way. He tried to say, "Are you going to the river?" But the words wouldn't come out. He felt a little choked. "Giovanni, a sea otter jacket is coming," shouted Zanelli. "Giovanni, a sea otter jacket is coming," shouted all others. Giovanni turned red and tried to walk past them in a hurry. He didn't really know whether he was walking or not. At that time, he noticed the tall figure of Campanella. Campanella felt sorry for him and smiled kindly a little. He was looking at Giovanni as if he was wondering whether he would get angry. Giovanni walked to escape. Shortly after the boys passed by, they started whistling again. As Giovanni turned the corner, he looked back. Zanelli had also turned back to look at him. And Campanella also whistled high and walked off towards the bridge. It could just be seen in the distance. Giovanni somehow felt very lonely. He suddenly started running. He put his hand on his ear and shouted, "Ah!" Some little children jumping up and down shouted, "Wow!" They thought Giovanni was excited. Giovanni hurried toward the dark hill. Five, the pillar on the hill. Beyond the fields there was a gentle hill. It was very dark tonight, and its flat top looked lower than usual. There was the Great Bear in the sky. Giovanni went up the path through the small woods. There was already a dew. On both sides there were bushes of various shapes and long grass. The path ran through them in a straight line, white in the light from the stars. In the grass, there were small insects that gave off a shiny blue light. Some leaves were transparent in the light. Giovanni thought that they looked like the lanterns his classmates had been carrying. As Giovanni passed out of the black pine and oak forests, the sky suddenly opened up before him. He could see the white Milky Way. It went all the way from the south to the north. He could also see the pillar at the top of the hill. There were wild flowers all over the place as if they came from a dream world to spread their scent. A bird cried out as it flew over the hill. Giovanni came under the pillar at the top. He threw himself down on the cold grass. The lights of the town were shining in the darkness. They looked like something deep down at the bottom of the sea. Giovanni could just hear the children singing and whistling and shouting. The wind was crying in the distance, and the grass on the hill was rustling quietly. Giovanni's shirt was wet with sweat, and he began to feel cold. He looked out across the dark fields beyond the edge of the town. Suddenly Giovanni heard the sound of a train. He stared out into the darkness. He could just make out a line of the little red lights in the train windows. Ah, there are many travelers in the train, he thought. They will be eating apples and laughing and having fun. Giovanni started feeling very sad. His eyes went up to the sky again. So they say that white belt in the sky is made of stars. He kept staring at the sky. His teacher had said it was a cold and empty place. But he couldn't believe that. On the contrary, the more he looked, the more he thought it must be full of fields and woods. The blue Lyra constellation seemed to divide into 3 or 4. It twinkled and its legs moved in and out many times. In the end it turned into something like a long mushroom. He thought that the town below now looked like a group of many distant stars or a great cloud of smoke. Six, Milky Way Station. After that, Giovanni noticed the pillar just behind him had changed. It was now in the shape of a triangular signpost. It flickered on and off like a firefly for a while. It seemed to be moving and slowly became clearer. Finally, it stopped moving. It stood straight in the field. The sky was like a plate of new blue steel. Then, somewhere, Giovanni heard a strange voice. Milky Way Station. Milky Way Station. Then, suddenly, everything went very bright. It was as if the lights of millions of firefly squid had been thrown across the sky. Or at a diamond company, someone suddenly turned over the hidden diamonds and scattered them. As the light became so brighter, Giovanni rubbed his eyes. Giovanni found himself sitting in the car of a little night train. He was able to hear the sound of the train. He was looking out of the window. The car was almost empty. It was lit by small yellow lights, and the seats were covered in blue cloth. Two big brass buttons were shining on the gray wall over there. Giovanni noticed there was a tall boy in the seat in front of him. He was wearing a black jacket that seemed to be wet. He was looking out of the window with his head out. Giovanni felt like he had seen the boy's shoulders. He really wanted to know who he was. When Giovanni tried to put his head out through the window, the boy pulled his head in. He looked at Giovanni. It was the Campanella. Giovanni was about to say, "Campanella, have you been here for a while?" But Campanella spoke first. Everyone ran a lot, but they missed this train. Zanelli also ran a lot, but couldn't catch this. Ah, yes, thought Giovanni. We all went out together. Shall we wait for them somewhere? He said out loud. Zanelli has gone home, Campanella answered. His father came for him. Campanella said so, but he looked very pale as if he was in pain. Giovanni had a strange feeling that he had forgotten something somewhere. He has. Shut up now. However, Campanella suddenly seemed to get well. He looked out through the window again and said cheerfully, "Oh, I've forgotten my water bottle and my sketchbook," he said. "But it's okay. We'll soon be at Swan Station. I really like watching swans. Even if they're flying over beyond the river, I'm sure we can see them." Campanella was holding a map in the shape of a round, black board. He kept turning it round. Right in the middle was the Milky Way. A railroad line ran south along its left bank of the Milky Way. The map was really good. The stations, triangular signposts, fountains and forests were shown by beautiful lights, blue and orange and green. Giovanni thought that he had seen the map somewhere before. "Where did you buy that map?" asked Giovanni. "It's made from obsidian, isn't it?" "I got it at the Milky Way station," replied Campanella. "Didn't you get one?" "No. I'm not sure I passed through Milky Way station." "We are here right now, right?" Giovanni pointed just to the north of the sign of Swan Station. "Yes." "Oh, is that the moonlight shining on the dry riverbank?" Campanella pointed out of the window. Giovanni looked. The silver grass of the sky was moving like waves all over the riverbank. It was rustling in the wind. "No, it's not moonlight," Giovanni replied. "It's shining because it's the Milky Way." He felt so happy that he wanted to jump up and down. He stamped his feet on the floor. Then he put his head out through the window. He whistled Star Traveler's song and pulled himself up higher, hoping to see the water of the Milky Way. But it wasn't very clear. However, he could see that the beautiful water was more transparent than glass. It was flowing along fast and silent. Sometimes there seemed to be fine purple waves, and the water shone like a rainbow. Giovanni noticed there were triangular signposts all over the fields. Beautiful phosphorescent light came from them. Those further away looked smaller. They were very clear and orange and yellow. Those that were closer looked bigger. They were pale and not so clear. The light shone all over the fields. Some were triangular and some were square, others were in the shape of chains. Giovanni was very excited. He shook his head many times. The beautiful, shining blue and orange signposts flickered and shook as if they were alive. "I think I've reached the plain of heaven," cried Giovanni. "I don't think this train is running on coal." He stuck his left hand out of the window and looked towards the front. "No, I guess it runs on alcohol or electricity," replied Campanella. The beautiful small train went on further and further through the silver grass of the sky, beside the water of the Milky Way, and past the faint blue light of the triangular signposts. "Oh, the gentian flowers are in bloom," said Campanella, pointing outside. "It's already autumn." There were lovely purple gentian flowers in the short grass beside the tracks. They looked as if they were carved out of moonstone. "Shall I jump out to collect some and then jump back on the train?" cried Giovanni. He was so excited. "It's too late. They've already gone so far behind us." Before Campanella said so, they went past more gentian flowers. They were all shining brightly. And then more. Gentians like wine glasses, with yellow bottoms. Gentians like fountains. Gentians like rain. And rows of shining triangular signposts in the fields, some not very clear, some burning bright. (7) The Northern Cross and the Priacine Coast. "Will my mother forgive me?" suddenly Campanella said, as if he had taken the plunge. He had a slight stammer. Giovanni stayed silent. "Ah, yes," he was thinking. "My mother is around that orange triangular signpost that looks like a distant dust. And now she is thinking about me." Campanella said, "I'd do anything for my mother if it would make my mother happy. But what makes her really happy?" He looked as if he was trying not to cry. "Nothing bad has happened to your mom, has it?" Giovanni cried out in surprise. "I don't know," replied Campanella. "Anyway, whoever it is, if you do really good things, they'll be really happy. So I think my mom will forgive me." He looked as if he had decided to do something. Suddenly the inside of the car was filled with bright white light. The riverbed of the Milky Way was gleaming like diamonds or drops of dew on the grass. The water ran on silent and with no shape. In the middle of the stream, they saw an island. There was a pale light around it. On the flat top of the island, there was a great shining white cross. It had a clear gold halo around it. It stood quietly as if it was made from frozen Arctic clouds. "Hallelujah! Hallelujah!" Voices arose all around Giovanni and Campanella. They looked round. There were travelers in the car. All of them had their hands together. They were praying facing the cross. Their clothes were neat and they were all holding a black book to their chests. They were wearing crystal beads around their necks too. Without thinking, the two boys stood up straight. Campanella's cheeks looked beautiful and shining like ripe apples. Then the island and the cross gradually moved to the back. The other side of the river shone with a pale light. The pampas grass was blowing in the wind, and gentians kept appearing and disappearing in the grass. They looked like gentle fire. For a short while, the view was blocked by thick pampas grass. Swan Island could just be seen a couple of times. But it soon became something small and far away. It now looked like a painting. Then the pampas grass rustled close to the train again, and the island disappeared from sight. Giovanni suddenly noticed a tall woman behind him. She was dressed in black and looked like a Catholic nun. He hadn't noticed her come into the car. She had green eyes and stared down at the floor. She still seemed to be listening to some words or voices coming from the island. The other travelers went quietly back to their seats. Giovanni and Campanella both felt somehow different from usual. There was a new feeling like sadness filling their hearts. They talked together softly. "We'll soon be arriving at Swan Station, won't we?" "Yes, at 11 o'clock. A green signal light and a white pole passed by the outside of the window. Then the lights in front of the points passed below the window. The train was getting slower. Soon, a beautiful row of lights on the platform appeared. They seemed to get bigger and bigger as the train slowed down. Their car stopped right in front of the big clock at Swan Station. The face of the clock looked very bright in the fresh autumn air. Its two blue steel hands pointed at 11 o'clock. Everyone got off at once. Now the car was empty. A notice below the clock said 20-minute stop. "Shall we get off as well?" asked Giovanni. "Why not?" The two boys jumped up together and jumped out of the door. They ran to the ticket gate. There was a bright purple light. There was no sign of anybody, not even the station master. The two went out to a small square in front of the station. It was surrounded by trees that looked like cut glass. There was a wide white road. It headed straight into the blue light of the Milky Way. All the other travelers had disappeared. Giovanni and Campanella started walking along the white road shoulder to shoulder. Their shadows spread in all directions like the spokes of two wheels. They soon came to the beautiful riverbank that they had seen from the train. Campanella picked up some of the beautiful sand. He dropped it in his palm. He spread the sand with his fingers and talked as if he were dreaming. "Look, this sand is all crystals. A little flame is burning inside each one." "That's right," Giovanni replied. But he was wondering where he had learned that. The stones on the riverbed were all transparent. Some were rock crystal. Some were topaz. Some had cracks in them. Some were corundum with a pale, misty light coming from their edges. Giovanni ran across the beach and put his hands in the water. The mysterious water of the Milky Way was more transparent than glass, but you could tell that it was running. The boys' hands in the water seemed to be floating up a little, and they were the color of mercury. And the ripples against them looked as if they were burning with a beautiful phosphorescence. The boys looked upstream. They could see a cliff covered with pampas grass. Below it there was a flat, white rock just like a playground. They could also see the silhouettes of 5 or 6 people bending down and then standing up again as if they were digging. Some tools shone in the light every now and then. "Let's go," The boys shouted at the same time and ran towards the rock. At the edge, there was a signpost made of china. It said Pliocene Beach. There were iron railings here and there and some lovely wooden benches. Campanella stopped and picked up something black. Look here. What's this strange thing? It looked like a long, pointed nut. It's a walnut, replied Giovanni. Oh, there are lots of them. I don't think the river washed them here. They must be from inside the rock. They're very big, aren't they? Double the size of usual walnuts. I'm sure they're digging something up over there. Let's go and see. Still holding the walnuts, the boys went towards the people. On their left, the waves seemed to be on fire. On their right, the silver heads of the pampas grass rustled all over the cliff. They could see a tall man who looked like a professor. He was wearing big boots and glasses with very thick lenses. There were 3 assistants. They were busily writing something in a notebook, using pickaxes and spades. The professor was giving orders to 3 assistants. Be careful, he shouted. Use a spade. A spade. Oh no, dig a little further. No, no. Why are you so rough? Giovanni and Campanella looked closely. They could see the bones of a very big animal in the soft white rock. It looked as if it had fallen and broken into pieces. Then they saw about 10 square, carefully cut pieces of rock. Each rock had a number on it and 2 hoof prints. The professor turned towards the boys and his glasses gleamed. Have you come to watch us? He asked. Ah, you found some walnuts. Well, they're from about 1.2 million years ago. They're quite new ones, in fact. This was beside the sea, you see, after the tertiary period. That was 1.2 million years ago. You can find seashells under here, where the river is now used to be salt water. This animal you can see here is a boss. Hey, you! Don't use a pickaxe there. Carefully do it with chisel. Where was I? Ah, yes, it's a boss. It's the ancestor of today's cows. There were many of them around in the past. What are you going to do with it? Ah, well, we need these bones to prove something. You see, we believe this rock here is 1.2 million years old. But the thing is whether other people will look at it the way we do. They may think this is just wind and water and empty sky. Do you get the idea? You see, but... Hey you! Don't use a spade there, either. The ribs of the boss are probably right under there. The professor ran off towards his assistants. It's time, let's go, said Campanella, looking at his map and his watch. Giovanni bowed to the professor. I'm sorry, but we must be going now. Oh, really? Well, goodbye then. The professor started, walking around again giving orders to his assistants. The 2 boys didn't want to miss the train. They ran like the wind across the white rock. And in fact, they found they really could run like the wind. They didn't get tired at all, and their feet didn't get hot. Giovanni thought, if I could run like this, I could run all over the world. The light at the station grew bigger. In no time at all, they were back sitting in their seats on the train. They looked out of the window in the direction of the river. Eight. The bird catcher. "May I sit here?" said a man's voice behind them. It sounded quite rough but kind. A man with a red beard and a rather bent back was standing there. He was wearing an old brown coat and carrying a bundle wrapped in white cloth over his shoulder. "Yes, that's fine," said Giovanni. The man smiled in his beard. He slowly put the luggage on the rack. Giovanni felt something very lonely and sad. He was silently looking at the clock in front of them. Then, far ahead, something like a glass whistle blew. The train was already running quietly. Campanella was looking here and there at the ceiling of the car. A black beetle had settled on one of the lights. Its large shadow was cast on the ceiling. The man with the red beard was looking at Giovanni and Campanella with a nostalgic smile on his face. The train was getting faster and faster. Pampa's grass and the river gleamed in turn outside the window. The man with the red beard asked the two of them, "Where are you two heading?" "Oh, well, we're going wherever the train takes us," replied Giovanni, a little embarrassed. "That's good. This train will go on and on forever and ever, you know." "Where are you going?" Campanella asked suddenly. He sounded as though he was looking for a fight. Giovanni couldn't help smiling. Then, the person sitting across from them, wearing a pointed hat and a large key hanging from his belt, looked at them and smiled. Campanella's face turned red and also started smiling. But the man with the red beard didn't look angry, but his cheeks moved as he answered, "Oh, I'll get off right there. I'm in the business of catching birds." "Really? What kind of birds?" "Oh, cranes and wild geese. Snowy herons and swans, too." "Are there many cranes around here?" "Yes. They've been crying for a while." "Haven't you heard them?" "No. You can still hear them crying. Now, listen carefully." The two boys raised their heads and tried to listen as hard as they could. All they could hear was the rumbling sound of the train. Then, from between the pampas grass wind, they could hear the sound of water flowing out somewhere. "How do you catch cranes?" "Do you mean cranes or snowy herons?" "Snowy herons," replied Giovanni, thinking it didn't matter which type of bird it was. "Ah, well, snowy herons are no problem. All the herons are made from the sand of the Milky Way. It sticks together, you see. And they always return to the river. They come down legs first like this. You have to wait for them on the riverbed. Then you grab their legs just before they touch the ground. The herons go hard. They feel safe and they die. Then all you have to do is press them like dried leaves." "Are you going to use a heron as a pressed leaf?" "Is it a specimen?" "It's not a specimen. Everyone wants to eat them." "That sounds strange," said Campanella with a doubtful look on his face. "Nothing strange or doubtful. Look." The man stood up and took the bundle down from the rack. He quickly unwrapped it. "Now look at these." I've just caught them." "Oh, they really are snowy herons," shouted the two boys together. The snowy herons were pure white and shining as the Northern Cross the boys had weaned earlier. The bundle contained the flat bodies of about 10 birds. They were lying with their black legs up against their bodies. "Oh, their eyes are closed," said Campanella. He gently touched one of the closed white eyes with a finger. The herons have crescent-shaped white eyes. The spear-like white hair on their heads was also neat. "Right? Just as I told you," said the bird catcher. He wrapped the birds up again in the cloth and tied the bundle with a piece of string. Who would eat snowy herons around here, thought Giovanni. And he asked, "Do herons taste good?" "Oh, yes. I get orders every day, you know. But wild geese sell better. The shape of a wild goose is far better, you see. And, above all, they're no trouble. Look." The bird catcher unwrapped the other end of his bundle. There were the bodies of some wild geese inside. They were also rather flat, lying with their heads side by side. They had yellow and blue spots and shone like a light. "This is ready to eat. Would you like to try some?" The bird catcher lightly pulled a leg off one of the geese. Then it came off easily, just as if it were made of chocolate. "Go on. Have some." He tore the leg into two and gave them each a piece. Giovanni took a bite and thought, Just as I thought. It is sweet. In fact, it tastes better than chocolate, but is this a wild goose ever flew anywhere? This man must be an owner of a candy store in a field somewhere. Oh, I shouldn't think things like that while I'm eating this man's sweets. He went on eating. "Have some more," said the bird catcher. Giovanni wanted to eat more, but he said, "No, thank you." Then the bird catcher offered some to the man with the key sitting across from them. The man took off his hat. Well, I feel sorry eating something you sell to make a living." "Oh, not at all," replied the bird catcher. "So how are the migratory birds this year?" "Oh, they're fine. But the day before yesterday, around the second period, calls came in from everywhere about the lighthouse light being turned off. Well, we didn't do anything, you know. A flock of black migratory birds flew right in front of the lights. We couldn't do anything, could we?" I said, "Hey, what are you talking about?" "There's nothing I can do. Tell my boss, the one with the thin legs and the long mouth, who wears a coat of feathers." "That's what I said. Ha ha ha." Suddenly there was no more pampas grass outside. The light came in again from across the fields. "Why are snowy herons more trouble?" asked Campanella. He had been thinking about asking him for some time. Well, in order to eat snowy herons, the bird catcher turned towards him. "You have to hang them for 10 days under the light of the water of the Milky Way. Or you can bury them in sand for 3 or 4 days. Then the mercury disappears and the birds can be eaten." "But this isn't a bird. It's just a sweet," said Campanella. He seemed to be thinking the same way as Giovanni. Suddenly the bird catcher stood up. "Oh, I have to get off here," he said. He took down his bundle and disappeared. "Where has he gone?" The two boys looked at each other. The lighthouse keeper tried to stretch himself a little. Then he smiled and looked through the window. When the two of them looked over there, the bird catcher just now was standing on the bank of the river with his legs wide open. There was grass all around him, gleaming with a beautiful yellow and blue phosphorescence. He had a serious look on his face, spread out his hands, and stared at the sky. "There he is," said Giovanni. "What a strange position he's in. I'm sure he's about to catch some more birds. I hope some come down before the train moves." Just then a flock of snowy herons appeared from the empty, bellflower-colored sky. They looked just like snowflakes. They cried out as they came down. Then the bird catcher stood with his legs at a sharp 60-degree angle. As the birds came down, he grabbed their black legs with both hands and put them into a cloth bag as if it were all to order. The herons, like a firefly, gleamed blue for a while inside the bag, on and off, on and off. And finally, they all turned white and closed their eyes. Far more birds landed safely on the sand than were caught. But as soon as their feet touched the sand, they seemed to go flat and melt like snow. Then they spread across the sand. Their shape could still be seen in the sand for a while, going brighter and darker several times. But finally they turned into the same color as everything around them. The bird catcher put about 20 herons in his bag. Then he suddenly raised his arms. He looked like a soldier who has just been shot. Then he disappeared again. "Oh, I feel better now that's over," said a voice next to Giovanni. "There's nothing better than getting neither too many nor too few." The bird catcher was back next to them. He was already sorting out the birds he had just caught. He piled them up on top of each other. Giovanni didn't know whether what had happened was strange or not. How did you come back here so quickly from there?" he asked. "How?" replied the bird catcher. "Well, I'm back here because I wanted to come back here. By the way, where are you two from?" Giovanni wanted to reply at once. But he thought, well, where did I come from? Campanella also seemed to be trying hard to remember. His face was glowing. The bird catcher nodded as if he understood. "Ah, so you're from a place far away, are you?"